Good evening and welcome back to Paranoia Files. Tonight, prepare yourself for a descent into the disturbing truth that lingers just beneath the calm exterior of Snohomish County. What you're about to hear is not the stuff of rumor, but a stark, raw record of nightmare scenarios that investigators, families, and survivors have lived. Over the years, these 8 crime stories have been pieced together from witness confessions, historical records, and credible local accounts. And while every element has been rigorously validated, the reality may be more unnerving than any legend could offer. Each case draws you into a unique psychological storm. Unexplained disappearances, chilling attacks that bear the fingerprints of the unexplainable, cunning predators who see the world as their hunting ground, and secluded gatherings where belief becomes something altogether horrifying. All names and identifying details have been altered out of respect for the living. But the fear at the heart of these stories is untouched, echoing the experiences of those who saw the darkness firsthand. If you value real encounters and want to confront genuine horror, make sure you subscribe to Paranoia Files for daily content that will ensure you never look at the quiet corners of your world the same way again. Hit that notification bell and join us, because true terror never waits for an invitation. I have replayed that November morning 1,000 times in my mind, searching for the moment when I should have known something was wrong. My brother always called when he was running late, always. That is the kind of person he was, dependable to a fault. The one who showed up early to everything and texted our mother the moment he got home from anywhere. So when his phone went straight to voicemail that Thursday morning, my stomach dropped before my brain could even process why. His name is not important here, but for the sake of this account, I will call him Carter. He was 26 years old that autumn, working as an environmental consultant for a firm in Everett, living in a modest apartment just off Highway 2 near Monroe. We had grown up in Snohomish County, knew the roads like the backs of our hands, and Carter drove the same route to work every single day. 32 minutes door to door if traffic was light. He timed it obsessively, always leaving at exactly 7:15 in the morning to beat the worst of the commute. That morning started ordinary enough. I was living in Seattle at the time, finishing up my nursing degree, and Carter had texted me the night before about meeting up that weekend to go hiking near Granite Falls. He sent me a trail map, asked if I wanted to leave early Saturday or sleep in. I told him early, and he replied with a thumbs-up emoji at 10:43 on Wednesday night. That was the last message I ever received from him. Thursday morning, our mother called me around 9:30, her voice tight with that specific kind of worry that mothers have when they know something is off but cannot articulate why. Carter had not shown up for his morning meeting, she said. His boss had called the house because Carter was not answering his cell, and nobody could remember the last time Carter had missed work without notice. She asked if I had heard from him, and when I said no, the silence on the other end of the line felt heavy enough to suffocate me. I told her I would drive up, that it was probably nothing. Maybe his car broke down in a dead zone, maybe his phone died and he hitched a ride. But even as I said it, I did not believe my own reassurances. Carter kept a car charger plugged in at all times. He was meticulous about maintenance on his Toyota. He did not take risks or deviate from routines. By the time I reached Monroe, our mother had already filed a missing person report with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who took the report was kind but matter-of-fact, explaining that most missing adults turn up within 24 hours, that Carter was likely fine, that sometimes people just need space. But our mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face, and said what I had been thinking since her first phone call. Carter would never do this, not without telling us, not without a reason. The first 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, social media posts, and driving every possible route Carter might have taken. His apartment was untouched. His bed was made. His work bag sat by the front door, packed and ready for the day he never made it to. His car, a silver 2015 Toyota Camry, was nowhere to be found. The police ran his plates, checked traffic cameras, reached out to hospitals and jails. Nothing. It was as if Carter had driven into the fog that morning and simply ceased to exist. On Saturday, the day we were supposed to go hiking, a search party gathered near Cavallero Hill, an area Carter sometimes drove through when he wanted to avoid highway congestion. Volunteers from the community, people who had never even met Carter, showed up with dogs and flashlights and thermoses of coffee. We walked the tree lines, checked the shoulders of back roads, peered into drainage ditches, and called his name until our voices went hoarse. The woods swallowed our shouts without echo, and the November cold seeped through our jackets like we were made of paper. It was a jogger who found his car 3 days later parked at an odd angle on a narrow Forest Service road about 6 miles east of Sultan. The road was barely used, mostly accessed by hunters and loggers, and it dead-ended after another 2 miles into thick wilderness. Carter's Camry sat there with the driver's side door ajar, keys still in the ignition, his phone on the passenger seat with a shattered screen. The battery was long dead. There was no signs of a struggle, no blood, no indication of what had compelled Carter to drive down that isolated road on a Thursday morning when he should have been halfway to Everett. The sheriff's office processed the scene thoroughly. They found Carter's wallet in the center console, his credit cards and cash untouched. His work bag was still in the trunk. A half-empty water bottle sat in the cup holder, and his coat hung on the hook behind the driver's seat. It was as if he had simply gotten out of the car and walked away, leaving everything behind. But why? And where did he go? The detective assigned to Carter's case, a woman with gray streaks in her hair and tired eyes, told us that this kind of disappearance was uncommon but not unheard of. People sometimes experience mental health crises, she said gently. They walk into the woods without intending to come back. But Carter had no history of depression, no substance abuse, no warning signs that anyone could identify. He had plans. He had a future. He had texted me about hiking just 2 nights before. Search and rescue teams combed the area around the Forest Service road for weeks. They brought in cadaver dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging, volunteers who bushwhacked through dense underbrush until their clothes were torn and their hands were bleeding. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, not a single trace of where Carter had gone after leaving his car. The forest had swallowed him as completely as if he had never existed at all. As the weeks turned into months, the searches grew less frequent, and the phone calls from the detective became shorter and less hopeful. The case went cold, filed away with the dozens of other unsolved missing persons cases in Snohomish County. Our mother stopped sleeping. I stopped going to classes. We existed in this horrible limbo where we could not grieve because we did not know if Carter was dead, and we could not hope because nothing about his disappearance made sense. I started spending my weekends driving the back roads near where Carter's car was found, pulling over at random intervals to walk into the woods and call his name. I do not know what I expected to find. A clue, maybe. A sign. Some explanation for the inexplicable. What I found instead were other people doing the same thing. A father whose daughter had vanished near Granite Falls 5 years earlier. A woman whose brother had disappeared after telling his wife he was going for a drive to clear his head. We shared our stories in hushed tones on the side of logging roads, bonded by the specific agony of not knowing. There were whispers, of course. Small towns breed rumors like bacteria, and soon people were speculating about everything from Carter running away to start a new life, to foul play, to something darker and less explainable. Some locals talked about the woods near Sultan being cursed, about people who had vanished there over the decades without explanation. Hunters who never came back, hikers who walked off trails and were never seen again. The rational part of my brain dismissed these stories as folklore, but the desperate part, the part that would have accepted any explanation no matter how absurd, could not help but listen. 1 year after Carter disappeared, I received a phone call from a hiker who claimed to have found something near the area where Carter's car had been located. I drove out there immediately, my heart hammering with hope and dread in equal measure. What the hiker had found was a single sneaker, weathered and half buried in leaves about 2 miles from the Forest Service road. The detective came out to examine it, and after comparing it to photos of what Carter had been wearing, confirmed that it was not his. Just another piece of debris in an endless forest. But something about that day changed my perspective. Standing there in the woods, surrounded by trees that had been growing for centuries before any of us were born, I realized that the forest did not care about our questions or our grief. It simply existed, vast and indifferent, keeping whatever secrets it chose to keep. Carter had walked into that wilderness for reasons I would probably never understand, and it had decided not to give him back. I still think about him every single day. I wonder if he is out there somewhere, living under a different name, having walked away from his old life for reasons that made sense only to him. I wonder if something terrible happened, if he encountered someone with dark intentions on that isolated road. I wonder if he simply got lost, disoriented in the dense undergrowth, and succumbed to the elements before anyone could find him. The not knowing is its own kind of torture, worse in some ways than any definitive answer could be. Our mother keeps Carter's room exactly as he left it. His hiking boots still sit by the door. His favorite coffee mug, the one with the faded National Parks logo, remains in the cabinet, unused. She has aged a decade in the 5 years since he vanished, her face etched with the kind of sorrow that never quite heals. Sometimes I catch her staring out the kitchen window toward the mountains, and I know she is wondering the same things I wonder. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office still lists Carter as an active missing person case. His face is on databases and websites, frozen in time at 26, smiling in a photo from a camping trip we took the summer before he disappeared. Tips come in occasionally, mostly dead ends, and the detective still calls every few months to let us know they have not forgotten. But I know the statistics. The longer someone is missing, the less likely they are to be found alive. After 5 years, hope becomes something you carry more out of habit than genuine belief. I have learned to live with the uncertainty, though it never gets easier. I have gone back to school, finished my degree, started working. But there is always this hollow space where my brother used to be, this question that will probably never be answered. Why did Carter drive down that Forest Service road? What made him get out of his car and walk away from everything he knew? And where is he now? The woods near Sultan still call to me sometimes. I drive out there on difficult days, park where his car was found, and walk the same trails the search parties walked years ago. I do not expect to find anything anymore. I just need to feel close to the last place Carter was known to be, to stand in the shadow of the same trees that watched him disappear. Maybe someday the forest will give up its secrets. Maybe someday we will have answers. But until then, all I have are questions and memories and the terrible knowledge that sometimes people vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the unbearable weight of their absence. The Snohomish River looks different at night. During the day, it is all glittering surface and tree reflections, families fishing from the banks, kayakers gliding past in neon life vests. But after sunset, especially in November when the fog rolls in thick and low, the river transforms into something else entirely. Something ancient and patient, like it has been waiting all along for the right moment to reveal what it knows. I learned this the night we went searching for Jaden. It was a Friday evening, second week of November, and the temperature had dropped below 40 degrees by the time the sun disappeared behind the Cascades. Our friend group had gathered at the old boat launch near Snohomish, the one locals use because it does not require a permit and nobody asks questions. We were supposed to be celebrating. Jaden had just gotten accepted into the engineering program at University of Washington, and we had planned this whole thing. Bonfire, music, maybe some stupid drinking games to mark the occasion. But Jaden never showed up. At first we were annoyed more than worried. Typical Jaden, someone said, always running late, probably got caught up tinkering with that motorcycle he was restoring in his garage. We sent texts that went unanswered. We called and got voicemail. By 8 o'clock, when the bonfire was burning hot and everyone else had arrived, the annoyance had started curdling into something sharper. Tyler pulled up Jaden's location on his phone, that feature we all shared with each other because our parents insisted on it after too many news stories about missing kids. The little blue dot showed Jaden's phone was somewhere near the river, maybe a quarter-mile upstream from where we were gathered. Not moving, just sitting there in one spot like it had been for the past 2 hours. We decided to go look, more out of curiosity than genuine concern. Maybe Jaden had gone for a walk to clear his head before joining us, got distracted by something, lost track of time. It was the kind of thing that made sense in the moment, before we knew better. The 5 of us walked along the riverbank, flashlights cutting through the darkness, calling Jaden's name into the fog that seemed to swallow our voices before they could travel more than a few feet. The river moved beside us with this constant low whisper, water over rocks, current pulling eternally toward Puget Sound. Tyler kept checking his phone, guiding us closer to where Jaden's location showed, until we were standing in a small clearing maybe 20 feet from the water's edge. That is where we found Jaden's phone, face down in the mud, screen cracked but still glowing when Tyler picked it up. And next to it, Jaden's wallet, his car keys, and one of his shoes. Just one. The left one. The laces were still tied. Everything inside me went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the November air. We started shouting Jaden's name louder, more desperate, fanning out, along the riverbank with our flashlights sweeping across the dark water. The fog was so thick we could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the river kept making these sounds, splashes and ripples that could have been fish or current or something else entirely. Tyler called 911. The rest of us kept searching, crashing through the underbrush, checking behind trees and fallen logs, looking for any sign of where Jaden might have gone. Brooklyn found drag marks in the mud leading toward the water, these 2 parallel lines like heels digging in. And we all stood there staring at them, nobody wanting to say out loud what we were all thinking. The police arrived within 15 minutes, followed by search and rescue teams with their German shepherds and high-powered flashlights. They taped off the area, asked us 100 questions about when we had last seen Jaden, whether he had seemed upset or depressed, if there was any reason he might hurt himself. We answered as best we could, but the truth was that Jaden had seemed fine, better than fine. He was excited about college, about the future, about everything. The search went on all night. Boats with spotlights moved up and down the river, divers in dry suits wading through the shallows, volunteers walking the banks calling Jaden's name until their voices were raw. I stayed until dawn, watching the fog finally lift as the sun came up, revealing the river in all its ordinary morning beauty. It looked so innocent in that light, so incapable of hiding anything terrible. They found Jaden 3 days later, caught in a tangle of roots and debris about 2 miles downstream. The medical examiner ruled it drowning, but that determination did not answer any of the questions that mattered. Why was Jaden at the river that night instead of at our bonfire? Why were his phone and wallet and single shoe arranged so deliberately in that clearing? What had caused those drag marks in the mud? The detective assigned to the case, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, told us that sometimes people experience sudden psychiatric breaks, do things that do not make sense to anyone else. But Jaden had no history of mental illness. He was not on any medications. There were no drugs or alcohol in his system when they performed the autopsy. The official report listed Jaden's death as accidental drowning with undetermined circumstances. But there were details that never made it into that report, things the detective mentioned quietly and then seemed to regret sharing. The autopsy found bruising on Jaden's arms and legs that was difficult to explain from drowning alone. There were scratches on his hands, defensive wounds maybe, like he had been fighting something. And the position where they found his body, the way he was tangled in those roots, the medical examiner said it was unusual, like something had held him there. I went back to that clearing by myself a week after they found Jaden. I do not know what I was looking for, exactly. Closure maybe, understanding, some sign that would make sense of what happened. The police tape was still up, fluttering in the breeze, and Jaden's memorial had already started to grow. Flowers wrapped in plastic, stuffed animals, handwritten notes weighed down with river rocks. I stood there for a long time listening to the water, and that is when I heard it. A sound I cannot quite describe, somewhere between a whisper and a moan coming from the direction of the river. I told myself it was just wind through the trees, or water over stones, or my own grief playing tricks with my perception. But it sounded like a voice. It sounded like someone calling out. I have gone back to that spot maybe 20 times since then, always alone, always at night when the fog is thick. I tell people I'm leaving flowers or cleaning up the memorial, but the truth is I am listening, waiting, hoping the river will tell me what really happened that November night. Other people have their theories. Tyler thinks Jaden was meeting someone there, maybe a romantic interest he had kept secret, and something went wrong. Brooklyn believes it was foul play, that someone attacked Jaden and staged the scene to look like suicide or an accident. The police have their official explanation of a tragic drowning. Case closed, nothing more to investigate. But I know what I heard that night we found Jaden's phone. Before the police arrived, before the chaos of the search, there was a moment when we were all standing in that clearing in complete silence. And in that silence, I heard a scream. Short and sharp and absolutely terrified, coming from somewhere out over the water. The others claim they did not hear it, that I was imagining things in the panic of the moment. But I know what I heard. There are stories about the Snohomish River. Local legends that people share around campfires or late at night when they have had too much to drink. Stories about something that lives in the deep pools where the current slows and the water turns dark. Something that has been there longer than the towns and the bridges and all the people who think they own these riverbanks. Something that takes what it wants. I researched the history after Jaden died, spending hours in the library going through old newspaper archives and historical records. I found more drownings than I expected, deaths that went back decades all along this stretch of river. Some were ruled accidents. Some were never solved. Some had the same strange details. Belongings left behind in neat piles, drag marks leading to the water, bodies found miles downstream in impossible positions. In 1983, a college student named Michael drowned near this same spot. His friends said he had walked away from their campsite to get more firewood and never came back. They found his jacket folded on a rock by the river's edge, his wallet placed carefully on top of it. In 1997, a woman named Sarah disappeared while jogging along the river trail. Her body was recovered a week later, caught in the same tangle of roots where they found Jaden. The medical examiner noted unusual bruising, but the case was closed as an accidental drowning. In 2004, a teenager named Marcus was last seen fishing from the bank. His fishing rod was found still cast into the water, his tackle box open beside it, one shoe sitting next to his folding chair. The pattern was there if you looked for it, if you were willing to see it. But when I brought these cases to the detective, showed him my research, he looked at me with sympathy and concern, the way you look at someone who is not handling grief well. He explained about confirmation bias, about how humans see patterns where none exist, about how tragic accidents sometimes share similar details purely by coincidence. Maybe he was right. Maybe I am seeing connections that are not really there, trying to make sense of something that has no sense to be made. But I cannot shake the feeling that the river knows more than it is telling, that it has been keeping secrets for a very long time. Jaden's mother still calls me sometimes, usually late at night. She asks the same questions over and over. Did Jaden seem upset? Was there anything I noticed that she missed? Could I have done something different that would have changed what happened? I give her the same answers every time, but they never satisfy either of us. The memorial by the river has become permanent now. Someone built a small wooden bench there with a plaque that has Jaden's name and dates. People leave fresh flowers regularly, especially on his birthday. I go there less often than I used to, but I still think about that night constantly. Still hear that scream echoing in my memory. Sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, I imagine going back to that clearing one more time. Walking down to the water's edge, calling out to whatever is down there in the dark and the cold, demanding answers, demanding to know what happened to my friend. But I am afraid of what might answer back. The Snohomish River keeps flowing, indifferent and eternal, carrying its secrets downstream toward the sea. And somewhere in its depths, in the places where the current runs strange and the water turns black, I believe it holds the truth about what happened to Jaden. About what happened to all of them. I just do not know if I really want to know that truth. Because some answers I have learned are worse than the questions. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried in the dark water, where they cannot reach up and pull the rest of us down. But the river remembers. And late at night, when the fog rolls in thick and the world goes quiet, I swear I can still hear it whispering. I need to tell you about Piper because nobody else will. Not her family, who moved away 3 years ago without a word to anyone in town. Not the police, who filed her case under runaway and stopped looking after the first week. Not the kids at school who whispered about her for a month before moving on to newer gossip. Only I remember. Only I carry what happened. Piper and I met in 4th grade, bonded over our shared love of horror movies and our mutual hatred of gym class. By the time we were 15, we were inseparable, the kind of friends who knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, who could communicate entire conversations with a glance across a crowded room. We told each other everything, or at least I thought we did. The sleepwalking started when Piper was 7 years old, or so her mother told me once over lemonade on their back porch. She said Piper would get out of bed in the middle of the night and wander through the house with her eyes open but not really seeing. Talking to people who were not there. Doctors called it a sleep disorder, prescribed medication that did not work, suggested therapy that her parents could not afford. Eventually, Piper seemed to grow out of it. The episodes became less frequent, then stopped altogether around age 12. But they came back the autumn we turned 15, November specifically. The same November she disappeared. Piper lived in one of the old houses near Machias, the kind that had been there since before Snohomish County really existed as anything more than logging camps and indigenous land. Her family rented it cheap because it needed work, because the roof leaked when it rained hard, because something about the place made people uncomfortable in ways they could not quite articulate. The woods pressed close on 3 sides, dense Douglas fir and hemlock that blocked out the sun even at noon. She told me about the voices 3 weeks before she vanished. We were sitting in her bedroom, supposedly studying for a history test, but mostly just talking about nothing important. The way teenage girls do when they are trying to avoid thinking about the future. Then out of nowhere, Piper said, "Do you ever hear people calling your name when nobody is there?" I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face was serious, almost scared, and that stopped my laughter cold. She explained that for the past month she had been hearing whispers in her room at night, always after midnight, always when she was alone. Voices that seemed to come from the woods outside her window, calling her name in this sing-song way that made her skin crawl. "Piper, Piper, come out, Piper." I asked her if she had told her parents. She shook her head. They would just say it was stress or that she was making it up for attention. They did not believe in anything they could not see or touch or pay bills for. So she kept it to herself, tried to ignore the voices, buried her head under her pillow, and waited for dawn. But the voices were not the worst part, she said. The worst part was that sometimes she found herself standing at her window in the middle of the night with no memory of getting out of bed. Standing there in her pajamas, hands pressed against the glass, staring out into the dark woods. And the terrible thing was that part of her wanted to open the window. Part of her wanted to climb out and follow the voices into the trees. I told her she should see a doctor, that the sleepwalking was coming back, that she should tell someone who could actually help. But Piper made me promise not to say anything to anyone, and I kept that promise because that is what friends do. We keep each other's secrets, even when those secrets might kill us. The night Piper disappeared was a Friday in mid-November. We had made plans to watch movies at my house, but she canceled last minute, said she was not feeling well. I texted her goodnight around 11 and she responded with a simple sleep tight and a ghost emoji. It was the last message I ever received from her. Her mother found Piper's room empty the next morning. The window was open, curtains blowing in the cold air. Her bed was still warm. Her phone was on the nightstand, charging. Her shoes were lined up neatly by the door. But Piper was gone. The police came quickly at first. They searched the woods around her house with dogs and helicopters, interviewed everyone who knew her, treated it like the serious emergency it was. But when they did not find any evidence of foul play, when her parents mentioned the history of sleepwalking, when no ransom note appeared and no body turned up, the investigation changed. They started talking about troubled teens and running away. They suggested Piper might have met someone online, might have been planning this for weeks. I told them about the voices, about how Piper had been hearing things calling to her from the woods. But the detective looked at me with this patronizing sympathy, like I was a child telling ghost stories, and suggested that Piper had mental health issues nobody had noticed, that maybe she had walked into the woods during a sleepwalking episode and gotten lost, that teenagers sometimes do impulsive things. They stopped searching after 10 days, filed the case, moved on. But I kept looking. Every weekend for months I walked through those woods behind Piper's old house, calling her name, searching for any sign of where she might have gone. The forest was vast and dense, easy to get turned around in, easy to disappear into. I found deer trails and old logging roads, abandoned campsites and forgotten clearings, but I never found Piper. What I did find were the symbols, carved into tree bark, scratched into rocks, drawn in the dirt with sticks. Strange circular patterns and angular designs that looked almost like letters, but in no alphabet I recognized. They were concentrated in an area about half a mile from Piper's house, in a natural bowl where the trees grew even thicker and the sunlight barely penetrated. I took pictures, showed them to the police. They said kids probably made them, bored teenagers playing at witchcraft. Nothing to do with Piper's disappearance, but I knew better. These symbols were old, weathered, carved deep into bark that had grown over them years ago. Then I started finding the missing person flyers, not for Piper, but for others. Girls mostly ranging from teenagers to young women in their 20s who had disappeared from the area over the past 40 years. I found them online, in newspaper archives at the library, on message boards where people discussed unsolved mysteries. The pattern was undeniable once I started looking for it. A 17-year-old girl named Emily vanished from her home near Gold Bar in 1983, last seen standing at her bedroom window in the middle of the night. A 19-year-old named Jessica disappeared from a camping trip near Verlo in 1995. Her tent was found empty, her belongings untouched, her boots still inside. A 22-year-old named Melissa went missing from her apartment in Granite Falls in 2008. Her roommate said she had been acting strange for weeks, talking about hearing voices in her dreams. All of them were last seen near the woods. All of them vanished without a trace. All of their cases went cold within months. I tried to tell people about this pattern, about what I had found, but nobody wanted to listen. Piper's parents had moved away, unable to bear living in the house where they lost their daughter. My own parents forbade me from going back into those woods, worried I was developing an unhealthy obsession. My friends stopped wanting to talk about it, tired of my theories and my grief. So I kept it to myself. Kept researching, kept finding more cases, kept walking those woods when I could sneak away, drawn back to that clearing with the symbols carved into the trees. Something happened there. Something was still happening there. I could feel it every time I stood in that place, this weight in the air, this sense of being watched by things that had no eyes. The worst night was about 6 months after Piper vanished. I had gone back to the clearing alone, determined to figure out what the symbols meant. I brought a notebook, copied them all down, planned to research them online when I got home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees, and I knew I should leave before it got fully dark. But I was so focused on my work that I lost track of time. When I finally looked up, night had fallen completely. The woods were pitch black except for my phone's flashlight, and suddenly I could not remember which direction I had come from. The trails all looked the same. The trees all looked identical. I turned in a slow circle, trying to orient myself, when I heard it. Piper. Not my name, Piper's name. Called out in that same sing-song voice she had described, coming from deeper in the woods. Piper, Piper, come out, Piper. Every rational part of my brain told me to run, to pick a direction and run as fast as I could until I found the road. But I was frozen, listening to that voice calling my friend's name over and over, echoing through the trees from a source I could not locate. Then I saw them. Figures between the trees, not quite solid, not quite transparent, moving in the darkness beyond my phone's light, pale shapes that seemed to drift rather than walk. And I knew with absolute certainty that these were what had been calling to Piper. These were what had taken her. I ran. I do not remember the actual running, just fragments. Branches scratching my face, roots trying to trip me, my lungs burning. My phone dropping from my hand and plunging me into complete darkness. The voices following me, calling Piper's name, but getting closer, closer. I made it to the road somehow. Stumbled out of the woods half a mile from where I had entered, collapsing on the asphalt just as headlights swept around the curve. A woman stopped, helped me into her car, called my parents. I was scraped and bleeding, my clothes torn, my phone lost somewhere in those dark woods. But I was alive. I never went back to that clearing, never went back into those woods at all. I am 22 now, living in Seattle, trying to build a life that does not revolve around what happened to my best friend. But I think about Piper every day. Wonder if she is still out there somewhere, if those things kept her, if she is wandering those woods with no memory of who she was. Sometimes late at night when I cannot sleep, I hear whispers outside my apartment window. They do not call Piper's name anymore. They call mine. And the worst part is that same terrible urge Piper described, that part of me that wants to open the window and follow the voices into whatever darkness waits beyond. I know I should tell someone, should try again to make people understand what is really happening in those woods. But who would believe me? I barely believe it myself sometimes. It is easier to think Piper ran away, easier to accept the official explanation of a troubled girl who walked into the forest during a sleepwalking episode and got lost, easier than accepting that there are things in the woods of Snohomish County that are older and hungrier than we can understand. But I know the truth. I know Piper did not run away. I know she did not simply get lost. Something took her. Something that has been taking girls from these woods for decades. Something that speaks in the dark and calls them by name until they cannot resist anymore. And I know that someday, if I am not careful, it will take me too. This is a confession more than anything else. I am recording this because if something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth. My name does not matter, but you can call me Blake. What matters is what I saw, what I am still seeing. It started on a Tuesday evening in late November, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. I live on a small farm about 10 miles outside Snohomish proper, one of those properties that is more land than house, inherited from grandparents who believed in space between neighbors. The nearest home is half a mile down a gravel road, and at night, the darkness out here is absolute. No streetlights, no passing cars, just fields and forest and the kind of silence that can make you forget the rest of the world exists. I had finished the evening chores around 7:30, fed the chickens, checked on the horses, made sure everything was locked up tight for the night. The farmhouse is old, built in the 1940s with additions tacked on over the decades, creating this rambling structure that creaks and settles and makes noises I have learned to ignore. I made dinner. Some frozen thing I heated in the microwave, ate it standing at the kitchen sink while looking out at the dark fields beyond. That is when I saw him for the first time. Just a shape at the edge of the tree line, maybe 200 yards from the house. At first, I thought it was a deer. We get them all the time, coming out of the woods to graze in the fields. But this shape was wrong, too tall, too still, and it was facing the house in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. I watched for maybe 5 minutes, waiting for it to move, to reveal itself as something ordinary. But it just stood there, completely motionless, like a scarecrow someone had placed at the border of my property. I grabbed the binoculars I keep by the back door, the ones I use for watching hawks, and brought them to my eyes with hands that had started to shake for reasons I could not explain. The figure was a man. Tall, maybe 6 feet or more, wearing dark clothes that made him blend into the shadows of the trees behind him. But it was his face that made me drop the binoculars, that made my stomach turn over with instinctive revulsion. He was wearing a mask. Not a Halloween mask or a ski mask, but something that looked handmade, crude, fashioned from what might have been leather or thick fabric. It covered his entire face except for holes cut out for the eyes, and even from that distance, I could see those eyes reflecting what little light came from my kitchen window. He was staring directly at the house, directly at me. I backed away from the window, heart hammering, trying to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe it was just some kid playing a prank or a hunter who had gotten lost on my property. But hunters do not wear masks like that. And nobody stands that still, that deliberately, unless they want to be noticed. Unless they want you to know they are watching. I called the sheriff's office, told them there was someone on my property, possibly trespassing. The dispatcher said they would send a deputy, but it might be 20 minutes or more given how remote my location was. I stayed away from the windows, sitting in my living room with all the lights off, my grandfather's hunting rifle across my lap, even though I had not fired it in years. The deputy arrived 40 minutes later, spotlights from his patrol car sweeping across the fields as he pulled up the long driveway. I met him at the front door, explained what I had seen, pointed toward the tree line where the figure had been standing. We walked out there together, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, but found nothing. No footprints in the soft earth. No signs anyone had been there at all. The deputy was kind but clearly skeptical. He suggested it might have been a bear standing on its hind legs or shadows playing tricks in the darkness. He checked the perimeter of my house, made sure all my doors and windows were secure, and told me to call if I saw anything else unusual. Then he left, his taillights disappearing down the gravel road, leaving me alone again with the darkness and the silence. I did not sleep that night. Every sound the house made seemed amplified, every creak of old wood settling a potential footstep. I kept the rifle next to my bed and checked the locks on every door and window at least a dozen times. When dawn finally came, gray and cold through my bedroom window, I felt exhausted but relieved. Daylight made everything seem less threatening, more manageable. But he came back the next night, same time, same place. Standing at the tree line, wearing that horrible mask, staring at my house. I saw him from the upstairs bathroom window when I went to brush my teeth before bed. He had not moved an inch from where he stood the night before, like he had been there all day waiting for me to notice him. This time I did not call the police. What would I say? That the same figure was back. That he was not doing anything illegal, but his presence made me terrified. Instead, I grabbed my rifle and turned on every exterior light I had. The farmhouse lit up like a beacon, floodlights illuminating the fields, motion sensors triggering around the barn and outbuildings. The figure did not move, did not run, just stood there in the wash of light, that mask reflecting the brightness, those eyes still fixed on my house. I raised the rifle more to show I was armed than with any intention of firing, and that is when he moved for the first time. Not away toward the woods and safety, but forward. 3 deliberate steps closer to the house. Then he stopped again, waiting, watching. I fired a warning shot into the air, the crack of the rifle incredibly loud in the night silence. Birds exploded from nearby trees, the horses whinnied in their stalls. But the masked figure did not flinch, did not run. He stood there for another 5 minutes as if considering his next move, then finally turned and walked back into the woods with an unhurried pace that somehow made everything worse. I called the sheriff's office again. Different deputy this time, a woman who seemed more concerned than the first officer. She searched the tree line with her flashlight, found what might have been boot prints in the soft ground, and suggested I invest in security cameras. She filed a report, gave me her card, told me to call immediately if he came back. He came back every night for the next week. Always the same time, always the same place, always wearing that mask. Sometimes he stood at the tree line. Sometimes he moved closer, stopping at the fence that marked the boundary of my immediate yard. He never spoke, never tried to enter the property, just stood there watching, waiting for something I could not understand. I installed cameras, motion-activated lights. I changed my routine, stayed up later, varied when I turned off lights. Nothing mattered. He knew when I was looking, seemed to time his appearances for maximum effect. The cameras captured him clearly, this tall figure in dark clothes with that leather mask, but the footage was useless without a face to identify. The deputies came out 3 more times, searched the woods, checked for evidence, found nothing that could lead them to who this person was. They suggested I stay somewhere else for a while, maybe with friends or family in town, but this is my home, my grandparents' home. I will not be driven out by some psychopath playing mind games. Then the pattern changed. He stopped appearing every night. A night would pass with no sign of him, and I would start to relax, start to believe maybe he had finally lost interest. Then he would be back, closer than before, at the barn one night, near the chicken coop the next, beside my truck in the driveway, always that mask, always that stillness, always watching. I started researching online, looking for similar cases. What I found made me sick. Reports from across Snohomish County and neighboring areas of masked figures stalking rural properties. Some reports went back decades. Different masks, same behavior. Standing at property lines, watching homes, never quite doing anything illegal enough for law enforcement to act meaningfully. Some of the cases escalated. A family in Sultan had their windows smashed in the middle of the night, the masked figure finally breaking his silent vigil. A woman living alone near Gold Bar woke to find her front door open, muddy footprints leading through her house to her bedroom where she slept. A couple near Granite Falls heard scratching on their windows for weeks before finding symbols carved into their barn door. I found forum posts, blog entries, local news articles that never made it to major outlets, all describing the same thing. A stalker who wore crude masks, who watched and waited, who followed patterns only he understood. Some people thought it was multiple individuals, copycat stalkers inspired by each other. Others believed it was one person, someone who had been doing this for years, moving between victims, drawn to isolated properties and people who lived alone. The detective assigned to my case, a tired-looking man named Reeves, told me they had no way to predict what the masked figure would do next, no way to prevent him from standing on public land at the edge of my property. No way to arrest someone who had not technically committed a crime beyond trespassing. He suggested I leave, find somewhere safer, let the property sit empty until the stalker moved on to someone else. But moving on to someone else meant there would be someone else, another person living in fear, checking locks obsessively, jumping at every sound. I could not live with that. So I stayed. I fortified. I installed better locks, security systems, trail cameras throughout the woods. I learned to sleep in shifts, trained myself to wake at the slightest unusual sound. The rifle stays within reach at all times. I have memorized the layout of my property in darkness, know every tree, every rock, every place someone might hide. He still comes. Less frequently now, but more boldly. Last week I found him standing outside my bedroom window at 3 a.m, his masked face pressed against the glass, eyes staring down at me while I slept. The motion sensors should have caught him approaching, but somehow he had avoided them. I woke to see him there, screamed, grabbed the rifle, and by the time I got to the window, he was gone. Vanished into the darkness like he had never been there at all. The cameras caught nothing that night, as if he knows where every camera is positioned, how to move through blind spots, how to be invisible when he chooses. I know this cannot continue forever. Either he will escalate, finally cross the line from stalking to violence, or I will. I think about that moment often, what I will do when he finally tries to enter my house, whether I will have the strength to pull the trigger, whether he wants me to. Sometimes I wonder if that is the point. If he is waiting for me to snap, to make a mistake, to give him the justification he needs to finish whatever game he has been playing. Or maybe there is no point. Maybe he is just evil, finding pleasure in terrorizing someone he has never met for reasons that exist only in his damaged mind. I am recording this so someone knows the full story. If something happens to me, if I disappear, or worse, the masked man is real. He exists. And he is still out there somewhere in the woods around my farm, watching, waiting for his moment. To anyone listening to this, anyone who might be experiencing something similar, my advice is simple. Do not stay. Do not believe you can wait him out or protect yourself indefinitely. These people are patient in ways normal minds cannot comprehend. They will break you down slowly, erode your sense of safety until you are nothing but fear and paranoia. Leave while you still can. Let someone else deal with the property, the memories, the stubbornness that makes you think you can win against someone who has nothing to lose. I should have left months ago, but I did not. And now it feels too late. Now every night is a test of endurance, every shadow a potential threat. The masked stranger owns my fear, and fear is the most permanent kind of ownership there is. If you are listening to this and I am already gone, tell my story, warn others. Maybe that way some good can come from whatever happens to me. Maybe someone else will listen to this and make the choice I could not. But for tonight, I will do what I do every night. Check the locks, load the rifle, turn on the cameras, and wait in the darkness for the masked stranger to return. Because he always does. I am driving back to the cabin right now, hands shaking so badly I can barely keep the truck between the lines. I need to say this while it is still fresh, while the terror is still sharp enough to cut through the part of my brain that wants to rationalize what I saw. My name is Carter, and I need to tell someone about what happened in the woods near Lake Stevens before I lose my nerve or convince myself it was not real. It started as a camping trip. Just a group of 6 high school friends celebrating our last November before college applications consumed our lives completely. We had been planning it for weeks, choosing a spot deep in the national forest land east of Lake Stevens, far enough from established campgrounds that we could have total privacy. Tyler knew the area from hiking with his dad, said there was this perfect clearing near a creek where we could set up tents and build a fire without anyone bothering us. We arrived Friday afternoon, 3 cars packed with sleeping bags and too much food, that mix of excitement and nervous energy that comes with being 17 and pretending you are more independent than you actually are. The hike in took about 40 minutes, following an overgrown trail that barely qualified as a path, and by the time we reached the clearing, the sun was already starting its descent behind the Douglas firs. The spot was perfect. Exactly like Tyler described, a natural amphitheater of trees surrounding a flat area maybe 30 yards across, with a creek burbling along one edge. We set up tents in a semicircle, gathered firewood, and as darkness fell, we huddled around the flames, telling stupid ghost stories and eating s'mores that were more charcoal than chocolate. Brooklyn was in the middle of some story about the hook man when Tyler interrupted her, head tilted like he was listening to something the rest of us could not hear. We all went quiet, and that is when we heard it too. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving through the woods somewhere beyond the firelight. Not trying to be quiet, not trying to hide. Just walking with purpose in our direction. We called out, asked if someone was there, half expecting some park ranger to emerge and tell us we were camping illegally. But the footsteps stopped the moment we spoke. Complete silence except for the fire crackling and the creek flowing. We waited maybe 2 minutes, tension building with every second. Then Tyler laughed and said it was probably just a deer or elk. We went back to our stories, but the mood had shifted. Something felt wrong in a way none of us could articulate. Around midnight, we retreated to our tents. I was sharing with Tyler, and we lay in our sleeping bags talking in whispers about college and the future until his breathing evened out into sleep. I was almost asleep myself when I heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time, circling our campsite in a slow, methodical pattern. I could hear whoever it was moving from tent to tent, pausing at each one, then continuing their circuit. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and looked out. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely any light, but the moon was nearly full and illuminated the clearing in silver and shadow. And there, walking along the perimeter of our camp, was a figure. Tall, dressed in dark clothes, moving with an unhurried confidence that made my stomach clench with fear. I woke Tyler, pressed my hand over his mouth so he would not shout, and pointed. He saw it too. We watched as the figure completed its circuit of our camp, then stopped at the creek, standing there perfectly still, silhouetted against the moonlit water, watching us. We woke the others, and soon all 6 of us were huddled in Tyler's tent, whispering frantically about what to do. Savannah wanted to yell at the person, tell them to leave. Blake wanted to run back to the cars. But Jaden pointed out we were 3 miles from the nearest road in complete darkness, and we had no idea if this person was alone. Better to stay together, stay in the tents, wait for daylight when we could all hike out together. The figure stood by the creek for what felt like hours, not moving, not speaking, just existing as this dark shape against the trees. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it turned and walked back into the forest, footsteps fading into the distance. None of us slept. We huddled together with our cell phones providing pathetic circles of light, checking every few minutes that the figure had not returned. When dawn finally came, gray and cold through the tent fabric, we made a collective decision to pack up and leave immediately. No breakfast, no pretending everything was fine. Just stuff everything in bags and get back to the cars. That is when Brooklyn found them. The symbols, carved into trees all around our campsite, deep fresh cuts in the bark forming patterns that looked almost like letters but in no language any of us recognized. We had not noticed them the night before when we arrived, and the bark was still pale where it had been cut, meaning they were recent. Very recent. Tyler pulled out his phone to take pictures when Savannah screamed. We all ran to where she stood at the edge of the clearing, pointing with a shaking hand at what she had found. A circle of stones arranged in a perfect spiral pattern, and in the center, belongings. A backpack none of us recognized, a pair of hiking boots, a jacket, and next to them, half buried in pine needles, a driver's license. The name on the license was Brandon Perex. The photo showed a man in his late 20s with red hair and a hesitant smile. The license was from 2016, expired now, but what made everything worse was that I recognized the name. I had seen it on a missing person flyer at the grocery store in Sultan months earlier. This man had disappeared while hiking alone, his car found abandoned at a trailhead, no trace of where he had gone. We called 911. To come, operator kept us on the line while we explained where we were, what we had found. She told us to stay put, that sheriff's deputies and search and rescue were on their way. It took them nearly 2 hours to reach our location, and during that wait, we stayed clustered together in the center of the clearing, away from the trees, away from the symbols, trying not to think about what it meant that a missing man's belongings were here, arranged so deliberately. The deputies who arrived treated it as a potential crime scene immediately. They photographed everything, collected the belongings, took statements from each of us. The lead detective, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, asked us detailed questions about the figure we had seen. Height, build, how they moved. But all we could tell her was that it was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and had watched us for hours without saying a word. They found more evidence as they searched the area. More symbols carved into trees, extending in a pattern away from our campsite deeper into the forest. More belongings hidden in the underbrush. A cell phone with a shattered screen, a wallet, a watch. Items that matched descriptions from other missing person cases dating back years. The detective told us we needed to leave, that this was now an active investigation site. As we hiked back to our cars escorted by deputies, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Other hikers had reported similar experiences in this area over the past decade. Figures watching them from the tree line, footsteps circling camps at night, symbols appearing on trees near where they slept. Some of those hikers had cut their trips short and reported what they saw. Others had dismissed it and stayed. Some of those others never made it home. The detective asked if we had noticed anything else unusual. Any other people in the area when we arrived? Any vehicles at the trailhead besides our own? I remembered then that there had been another car, an old blue sedan with a layer of dust suggesting it had been there for days. We had assumed it belonged to another camper somewhere else in the forest. But what if it belonged to whoever had been watching us? What if they had been waiting there for days, maybe weeks, for someone to come along? They found more over the next week. The detective called me personally to update me, said she felt we deserved to know given what we had witnessed. The spiral of stones marked the location of a grave, shallow, hidden under debris containing human remains that were sent for identification. The symbols carved into the trees formed a trail leading deeper into the wilderness, and at various points along that trail, they found evidence of other graves. Other victims. The investigation is still ongoing. They have identified 3 of the victims so far using dental records and DNA. All were hikers who had gone missing in Snohomish County over the past 8 years, all last seen heading into remote, forest areas alone or in small groups. The detective thinks there may be more, buried deeper in the woods, waiting to be discovered. They never found whoever was watching us that night. The figure disappeared into thousands of acres of dense forest, and despite searches with helicopters and dogs, there was no trace of where they went. The detective believes whoever it is knows these woods intimately, has probably been using them as their hunting ground for years, and is still out there. I think about that night constantly, about how close we came to being the next victims, about what would have happened if we had been deeper sleepers, if we had not woken up when the figure was circling our tents, about whether they were planning to wait until we were all asleep before making their move, or if our presence had interrupted something else they were doing. The worst part is knowing they are still out there, still watching the trails, still waiting for the next group of hikers naive enough to think they are safe in the woods. The detective warned us not to go back, not to hike alone, to always tell someone where we are going and when we expect to return. But I know people will not listen. I know there will be more victims. Sometimes late at night I think about Brandon, the man whose license we found, about how he must have been camping alone when the figure found him, about whether he heard footsteps circling his camp, whether he saw the dark shape watching from the tree line, about whether he knew what was going to happen before it did. The pines around Lake Stevens look beautiful in photographs, majestic and peaceful, the kind of wilderness people dream about escaping to. But I know what they hide now. I know that beauty can mask horror, that silence can mean danger, that sometimes the things watching us from the darkness are not animals or shadows, but something far worse. I will never camp in those woods again, never hike those trails. The forest has been ruined for me, transformed from a place of adventure into a graveyard with trees for markers. And somewhere among those pines a predator still waits, patient and cruel, ready for the next person who thinks they are alone. This is Brooklyn speaking. I am recording this because writing it down feels too permanent, too real, and I need to get it out before the memories consume me entirely. What I am about to describe happened between August and November of last year, and I am only alive because I ran when every instinct told me to stay. When belief became obedience, and obedience became something far darker. I grew up in Snohomish County, in one of those rural areas where neighbors are scattered across acres of farmland and forest, where everyone knows everyone else's business, where church on Sunday is less about faith and more about social obligation. My family was not particularly religious, but when my mother died suddenly the summer before my senior year, I found myself unmoored, searching for meaning in a world that suddenly felt arbitrary and cruel. That is when I met them, or rather, when they found me. It started innocently enough. A woman named Savannah approached me at a coffee shop in Monroe, noticed I was reading a book about grief and loss, and struck up a conversation. She was in her 30s, warm and articulate, with this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room. She told me about a community she belonged to, a group that met regularly to discuss philosophy and spirituality, to support each other through difficult times. She said they had helped her through her own period of darkness, and maybe they could help me too. I should have recognized the recruitment tactics, should have seen the warning signs. But I was 17 and grieving and desperately lonely. So when she invited me to a meeting, I said yes. The first gathering was held at a farmhouse about 10 miles outside Snohomish proper, down a long gravel road that dead-ended at a property surrounded by dense pines. There were maybe 15 people there, ranging from college age to retirement, sitting in a circle in someone's living room, drinking tea and talking about consciousness and meaning and the nature of reality. It felt harmless. It felt like exactly what I needed. They called themselves the Congregation of the Awakened, though they were careful to say they were not a church, not a religion, just seekers of truth who had found each other. The leader, a man in his 50s who went by the name Brother Colton, spoke with quiet authority about how most people sleepwalk through life, never questioning the illusions society imposes on them. He talked about awakening, about seeing beyond the veil, about accessing levels of consciousness that ordinary people could not comprehend. It all sounded profound at the time. Looking back, I can see it was just standard cult manipulation wrapped in New Age language. But I was vulnerable, and they were patient, and week by week they pulled me deeper into their world. The meetings became more frequent, twice a week, then 3 times, then almost daily. They encouraged us to distance ourselves from people who did not understand our awakening, people who would drag us back into unconsciousness. They had their own terminology, their own rituals, their own hierarchy. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the philosophical discussions gave way to something stranger. Brother Colton began talking about entities, beings that existed in dimensions parallel to our own, beings that could be contacted through proper rituals and states of consciousness. He said the congregation had been in contact with these entities for years, had learned secrets about the nature of reality that would terrify ordinary people. He said that soon, very soon, those of us who were truly awakened would be allowed to participate in the communion. The communion, they talked about it in hushed, reverent tones. It was the ultimate goal, the moment when we would directly experience these entities, when we would transcend our limited human consciousness and become something more. But we had to be ready, Brother Colton said. We had to prove our commitment. That is when things began to escalate. They asked us to cut off contact with family members who questioned our involvement. They asked us to give them money, donations to support the community. They asked us to move on to the property, to live communally so we could support each other through the awakening process. I did not move in, but several members did, converting the farmhouse into a kind of compound. I started spending most of my free time there, skipping school, lying to my father about where I was going. I was so deep in it by then, so convinced that I had found something real and important, that I could not see how completely they had isolated and manipulated me. The midnight ritual started in October. Brother Colton said we were finally ready for communion, that the entities were willing to make contact, but only if we followed the protocols exactly. We gathered in a barn behind the farmhouse, a structure that had been cleared of all farm equipment and filled instead with candles and strange symbols painted on the walls. The symbols looked ancient, like something from a language that predated written history. We stood in a circle, maybe 20 of us by then, and Brother Colton led us through hours of chanting. Repetitive phrases in a language I did not recognize, spoken over and over until the words lost all meaning and became just vibration. He said the entities were attracted to certain frequencies, certain patterns of sound, and if we maintained the chant long enough, they would appear. I remember feeling dizzy, lightheaded. The barn was stuffy and hot despite the November cold outside, thick with incense smoke and body heat. People around me started swaying, some falling to their knees, some speaking in what Brother Colton called the language of the awakened. And then he brought out the knife. It was not large, just a small ceremonial blade, and he said we needed to offer something of ourselves to complete the communion. He made a shallow cut on his own palm, let the blood drip onto the dirt floor of the barn, then passed the knife to the person next to him. And one by one, each member of the congregation cut their palm and let their blood fall. When the knife reached me, I hesitated. Something about the sight of all that blood mixing in the dirt, about the glazed expressions on people's faces, about the way Brother Colton was watching us with this satisfied smile, made alarm bells finally start ringing in my head. But everyone was watching me, waiting, and the pressure to conform was overwhelming. So I made the cut, shallow like the others, but enough to draw blood. That is when the screaming started. One of the members, a woman in her 40s named Mackenzie, collapsed in the center of the circle, convulsing and making sounds that did not seem human. Brother Colton rushed to her side, placing his hands on her head, shouting that the entities were here, that they were speaking through her, that this was the communion we had been preparing for. But something was wrong. Mackenzie was not just convulsing, she was seizing. Her eyes rolled back in her head, foam at her lips. I had taken CPR training before my mother died, and I recognized a medical emergency when I saw one. I shouted that we needed to call 911, that she needed a hospital. But Brother Colton ordered me to be silent, said that interrupting the communion would be dangerous for everyone. Other members moved to physically restrain me, to keep me in the circle, and that is when something inside me broke free from their influence. I fought my way out, ran from the barn into the cold November night, and kept running until I reached the road. I used my phone to call 911, gave them the address, told them someone was having a medical emergency and needed help immediately. Then I called my father, crying so hard I could barely speak, and begged him to come get me. He arrived before the ambulance, found me sitting on the side of the road covered in dirt and blood and my own terror. The paramedics went into the barn and brought Mackenzie out on a stretcher. She was still alive, but barely. The police came. They questioned me, questioned everyone they could find at the compound. Brother Colton claimed it was just a religious ceremony, that Mackenzie had experienced a spiritual episode, that he had no idea she had a pre-existing seizure condition. Most of the congregation backed his story, so unified in their responses that it was clear they had been coached. Mackenzie survived, but with brain damage from prolonged oxygen deprivation during her seizures. Her family sued the congregation, but the legal proceedings are still ongoing. The authorities investigated, found evidence of financial exploitation and coercive control. But building a criminal case against a cult is notoriously difficult when the members insist they are there voluntarily. The congregation still exists. They moved locations, changed their name slightly, but Brother Colton is still leading meetings, still recruiting vulnerable people, still promising awakening and delivering only trauma. I found their new location online, posted warnings about them on every forum and social media platform I could find. But there are always new people who think they are different, who think they will not fall for the manipulation. I spent months in therapy trying to understand how I let myself get pulled in so deep. My therapist explained how cult indoctrination works, how they identify vulnerable people and systematically break down their ability to think critically, how they use sleep deprivation and information control and social pressure to remake someone's personality. She said I should not blame myself, that these techniques work on intelligent people precisely because intelligent people think they are too smart to be manipulated. But I do blame myself for not seeing it sooner, for cutting my palm and bleeding into that dirt floor, for almost staying when Mackenzie started seizing, because part of me still believed Brother Colton knew what he was doing. The cult had rewired my brain so thoroughly that even in the face of someone dying, I questioned whether I should call for help. I think about the people who are still there, still attending midnight rituals in that barn. I think about what Brother Colton is building toward, because that night felt like just the beginning of something worse. The entities he talked about were not real, but his willingness to hurt people in service of his delusions was very real. And cults do not typically de-escalate on their own. They spiral, demanding more and more extreme demonstrations of loyalty, until eventually someone dies. I reported everything I knew to the FBI, to cult awareness organizations, to anyone who might be able to shut them down. But without members willing to testify, without harder evidence of illegal activity, there is only so much the authorities can do. So the congregation continues, and I have to live with knowing they are out there, recruiting people just like me, people who are grieving or lonely or searching for meaning. The scar on my palm has faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you are looking for it. But sometimes I press my thumb against it and remember the feeling of that knife cutting into my skin. Remember the sound of Mackenzie screaming. Remember the moment I finally understood that belief can be weaponized, that faith without question becomes dangerous, and that some congregations gather not to worship but to pray. This is Aurora speaking, and I am recording this statement at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office on November 19th at 2:37 in the morning. Detective Martinez is sitting across from me, and she has asked me to describe in my own words what happened tonight on Main Street in downtown Snohomish. I am going to try, but I need you to understand that what I am about to say sounds impossible. It sounds like the kind of thing a person makes up or imagines. But it happened. Every word of this happened. I worked the closing shift at the Rustic Cup, a coffee shop on First Street that stays open until midnight on weekends to catch the post-dinner crowd and the insomniacs. I am 23 years old, have been working there for 2 years while I save money for nursing school, and I have closed the shop alone probably 200 times without incident. Tonight was supposed to be no different. We had our last customer leave around 11:45, and I started the closing routine, wiping down tables, mopping floors, counting the register, doing all the mundane tasks that turn a busy coffee shop back into an empty space. By midnight, I had everything done except taking out the trash, which I always save for last because it means going out the back door into the alley. The alley behind our block of shops is not well lit. There is a single street light at the far end, maybe 50 yards away, that casts more shadow than illumination. The dumpsters sit about 15 feet from our back door, shared between us and the antique shop next door. I have taken trash out hundreds of times in the dark, usually while on my phone or listening to music, never thinking twice about it. But tonight, when I pushed open the back door with my hip, arms full of trash bags, I felt it immediately. That primal sensation of being watched. The kind of awareness that lives in the oldest parts of our brain, the parts that kept our ancestors alive when predators lurked in the darkness. Every hair on my arm stood up, and I froze in the doorway, bags still clutched against my chest. The alley looked empty. The dumpster sat where it always sat. The streetlight flickered at the far end like it always did. But something was wrong. The quality of the darkness was different, thicker somehow, like it had substance and weight. And then I saw it. A shadow. But not a normal shadow cast by an object blocking light. This was a shadow that existed independently, a darkness darker than the darkness around it, standing against the brick wall of the building across the alley. It was roughly human-shaped, maybe 6 feet tall, but the edges were indistinct, like smoke or fog given form. I stood there staring at it, my rational mind insisting it was just a trick of the light, a gap in my vision, anything but what it appeared to be. Then it moved, not walking, not floating, but shifting position instantaneously, from the far wall to a spot maybe 20 feet closer. Still human-shaped, still impossibly dark, and now I could feel its attention focused on me with the intensity of a physical touch. I dropped the trash bags and stumbled backward through the door, slamming it shut and locking it with fingers that would not stop shaking. Through the small window in the door, I could see the alley, empty now, the shadow gone as if it had never been there. I stood with my back pressed against the door, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. But I had not imagined it. I knew that with absolute certainty something had been out there, something that was not human, not animal, not anything I had a name for. And it had been watching me. I called my manager, Tyler, told him I was not feeling well and needed to leave the trash until morning. He was annoyed but said fine, just make sure to lock up properly. I grabbed my coat and purse from the back room, checked 3 times that the back door was locked, and left through the front entrance onto Main Street. Main Street at midnight is quiet but not deserted. There were a few cars passing by, a couple walking their dog across the street, the usual signs of life in a small town that has not quite gone to sleep. The normalcy of it made me feel foolish. What had I seen in that alley? Probably nothing. Probably just shadows in my own overactive imagination. I started walking toward my car, parked 2 blocks down near the library. The streetlights along Main were bright and evenly spaced, creating pools of yellow light separated by stretches of shadow. I walked through light, then shadow, then light again, my footsteps echoing on the empty sidewalk. That is when I saw it again. In one of the shadow spaces between streetlights, standing on the sidewalk about 50 feet ahead of me. The same impossible darkness, the same human shape, but now it was waiting directly in my path. I stopped walking. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The shadow did not move, just stood there, and even though it had no face, no features at all, I knew it was looking at me. I knew it with the same certainty you know when someone is staring at you from across a room. I turned around and started walking the other direction, back toward the coffee shop, planning to circle around the block to reach my car. But when I looked back over my shoulder, the shadow was following me. Not walking, just appearing in each shadow space as I passed through the lights. Light, then shadow with the figure in it. Light, then shadow with the figure in it. Getting closer each time. I broke into a run, my breath coming in panicked gasps, my shoes slapping against the pavement. I ran past the coffee shop, past the antique store, past the hardware store on the corner. There were buildings all around me, houses with lights on, people awake inside. But the street itself was empty. Just me and the thing that was following me through the shadows. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while running, barely able to talk coherently enough to give my location. The dispatcher kept asking what my emergency was and how could I explain. Something is following me. Something made of shadow. Something that exists in the spaces between lights. I saw a bar up ahead, still open, warm light spilling from its windows, music and voices audible even from outside. I ran for it like drowning person swimming for shore, burst through the door into the noise and the light and the blessed normalcy of drunk people playing pool and laughing at their own jokes. The bartender, a woman in her 40s with concerned eyes, asked if I was okay. I must have looked terrible, wild-eyed and out of breath, standing in the doorway like I was being chased by demons. I told her someone was following me, that I needed to stay inside until the police arrived. She locked the door, brought me a glass of water, let me sit at the bar while I caught my breath. Through the window, I could see Main Street, empty. No shadows that should not be there, no figure waiting in the darkness, just a normal November night in a normal small town. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 patrol officers who took me outside and walked the street with me, searching for whoever I said had been following me. I tried to explain what I had seen, but the words sounded insane coming out of my mouth. A shadow, a figure made of darkness. They searched the alleys, checked behind dumpsters, looked in parked cars. Found nothing. One of the officers walked me to my car, waited while I got in and locked the doors. He was kind but clearly skeptical, probably thinking I was drunk or high or suffering from some kind of episode. He told me to call if I saw anything else suspicious, then watched me drive away. That is when I should have gone home. Should have driven straight to my apartment, locked myself inside, and tried to forget what happened. But instead, I found myself driving back through downtown, past the coffee shop, past the bar, trying to make sense of what I had seen. And I saw it again, standing under a tree in front of the courthouse, the same impossible shadow, the same human shape, now completely still and watching as I drove past. I accelerated, ran the red light at the intersection, and did not stop until I reached the sheriff's office, which is where I am now, sitting in this interview room with Detective Martinez, trying to explain what sounds like a hallucination or a mental breakdown, but was neither. Something is on Main Street tonight, something that lives in shadows and follows women walking alone, something that should not exist but does. The detective has been patient, taking notes, not dismissing my story outright. She tells me there have been other reports, not many, and scattered over several years, but reports nonetheless of something shadowy, something not quite solid, seen around downtown Snohomish late at night. Always by women, always when they were alone. Most of the women who reported it were too embarrassed to file formal statements, afraid of being labeled crazy or attention-seeking. But 3 of those women disappeared, one in 2019, one in 2021, one just last month. All were last seen walking alone in downtown Snohomish late at night. All vanished without a trace, no bodies found, no evidence of where they went. The cases are technically still open, but with no leads and no witnesses, there is nowhere for investigators to look. Detective Martinez asks me if I would be willing to work with a sketch artist to try to describe what I saw in more detail. I almost laugh, because how do you sketch a shadow? How do you draw darkness given form? But I agree, because maybe if enough people report seeing it, maybe if enough descriptions match, someone will finally believe that something is hunting women in Snohomish. The detective is arranging for an officer to escort me home, to check my apartment and make sure I get inside safely. She is taking this seriously in a way the patrol officers did not, and I am grateful for that. But I can see the doubt in her eyes too, the unspoken question of whether I really saw what I claim to saw, or if this is elaborate delusion or cry for attention. I know what I saw. I know it was real. And I know that tomorrow night and every night after, it will be out there on Main Street, waiting in the shadows between streetlights for the next woman walking alone, waiting to follow her through the darkness, waiting for the moment when the streetlights end and there is nowhere left to run towards safety. I do not know if it is a person wearing some kind of camouflage, or an entity that should not exist, or something else entirely that my mind cannot process correctly. But I know it exists, and I know it wanted me. The detective is telling me I can go now, that the escort is ready. I'm going to drive home, lock every door and window, leave every light in my apartment on, and hope that whatever I saw cannot follow me beyond Main Street. But I do not think I will sleep tonight, or tomorrow night, or any night until I know what that shadow was and why it targets women like me. This is Aurora, ending my statement at 3:12 in the morning. If you are listening to this, if you are a woman who walks alone in downtown Snohomish at night, please be careful. Stay in the light. Do not walk alone if you can avoid it. And if you see a shadow that should not be there, run. Run as fast as you can toward people, toward noise, toward light. Because whatever it is still out there, and it is hunting. My name is Mackenzie, and this is my brother Colton. We are recording this together because the story we need to tell belongs to both of us, bound together by blood and loss and the terrible weight of questions that have no answers. What we are about to describe is not a single event, but a lifetime of living in the shadow of something that happened before we were old enough to remember. Something that has shaped every moment of our existence in ways we are only now beginning to understand. Our aunt disappeared in November of 1997. Her name was Rebecca, though we only know her from photographs and the stories our parents tell when they have had too much wine and forgotten to guard their grief. She was 24 years old, working as a teacher in Sultan, living in a small rental house near the Snohomish River. According to the police reports we obtained when we turned 18, she was last seen leaving a parent-teacher conference on a Thursday evening, walking to her car in the school parking lot. Her car was found the next morning in the same parking lot, keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, driver's side door standing open. Rebecca never made it home that night. She never made it anywhere. She simply ceased to exist somewhere between the school building and her vehicle, in a parking lot that should have been safe, in a town where everyone knew everyone else's names. The investigation lasted 6 months before going cold. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office interviewed everyone who had been at the school that night, searched the surrounding woods with dogs and helicopters, dragged portions of the river. They found nothing. No body, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses who saw anything unusual. Rebecca vanished as completely as if she had been erased from existence, leaving behind only her belongings and a family that would never fully recover. Our mother was Rebecca's younger sister, only 16 when it happened. She told us once, during one of those rare moments when she let herself talk about it, that the worst part was not knowing if Rebecca suffered, not knowing if she was taken by someone or if she walked away by choice, not knowing if somewhere out there in some nightmare scenario Rebecca might still be alive, waiting for someone to find her. Colton and I were born years after Rebecca disappeared. Colton in 2003, me in 2005. We grew up in the same small towns of Snohomish County, went to some of the same schools Rebecca attended, walked some of the same streets. And from the time we were old enough to understand, we grew up with her absence, with the framed photographs of a smiling woman we would never meet, with the way our mother's voice changed when someone mentioned Rebecca's name, with the knowledge that our family had a wound that would never heal. But it was more than just the absence. It was the signs, the impossible, unexplainable signs that maybe somehow Rebecca was still trying to reach us. The first sign that I remember clearly was when I was 7 years old. Colton would have been 9. We were at our grandmother's house, the same house where our mother and Rebecca had grown up, helping to clean out the attic. In a box of old school papers and yearbooks, we found Rebecca's diary from her senior year of high school. Our grandmother did not know it was there, said Rebecca must have hidden it and forgotten about it before she moved out. Colton opened it to a random page, and what we saw made us both go silent with shock. The entry was dated November 15, 2005, 3 days ago, years after Rebecca disappeared. The handwriting was Rebecca's, confirmed later by our mother, and the entry read, "I am still here. I am in the dark. Please keep looking." Our grandmother thought it was a cruel prank, someone's sick idea of a joke. But the diary had been sealed in that box for years, buried under other items in an attic nobody had accessed. There was no way someone could have added that entry without leaving evidence of tampering. The paper was the same age as the rest of the diary. The ink had faded the same way. Forensic analysis, which our parents paid for privately, confirmed the handwriting was Rebecca's and could find no evidence of forgery or recent writing. That entry should not have existed, but it did. The second sign came when Colton was 13. He woke up one November morning to find a note tucked into his backpack, written in the same handwriting as the diary entry. It said, "You look like Dad. I wish I could see you. The river knows where I am." Our parents contacted the police again, but without any evidence of how the note got into Colton's backpack, there was nothing they could investigate. Another dead end. Another impossible occurrence. The signs have continued over the years. Small things mostly. A text message from Rebecca's old phone number that has been disconnected for decades saying only, "November is when it happened." A voicemail left on our mother's phone in a voice she swears is Rebecca's, though the recording cuts off after just a few seconds. A letter delivered to our house with no postage, no return address, postmarked the day Rebecca disappeared but arriving 20 years later. Each occurrence has been investigated, each has been analyzed by experts who can find no rational explanation. Each has left us more convinced that somehow, impossibly, Rebecca is still trying to communicate, still trying to tell us what happened to her that November night in 1997. I started having dreams about her when I turned 16, the same age our mother was when Rebecca disappeared. Dreams where I am walking through dark woods, following a figure ahead of me who I know is Rebecca but can never quite catch up to. Dreams where I hear her voice calling for help but cannot find the source. Dreams where I see her face reflected in river water, lips moving but making no sound. Colton has had similar experiences. He says he has seen her twice, both times at night, both times near water. Once standing on a bridge over the Snohomish River watching him as he drove past. Once at the edge of Lake Stevens, her figure illuminated by moonlight before vanishing when he got closer. He knows they are not really sightings of Rebecca. Cannot be. But the experiences feel too vivid to dismiss as imagination. We have spent years researching her case, obsessively going through old police reports and newspaper articles, interviewing people who knew Rebecca, walking the areas where she was last seen. We have consulted with private investigators and psychics, skeptics and believers, anyone who might offer insight into what happened or what the signs mean. Some people think Rebecca's spirit is trapped somehow, unable to move on because her body was never found or her killer never caught. Others think the signs are elaborate hoaxes, someone's twisted attempt to keep the tragedy alive for reasons we cannot understand. Still others suggest we are experiencing shared delusions, trauma manifesting as paranormal experiences, our minds creating patterns from coincidence. But Colton and I know what we have experienced. We know the diary entry exists. We know the notes and messages are real. We know that something is trying to reach us across whatever boundary separates the living from the missing. Last month, on the anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance, we received a package in the mail. No return address, no note, just a small box containing Rebecca's necklace. The same necklace she was wearing in the last photograph taken of her, visible in the picture from the parent-teacher conference the night she vanished. Our mother recognized it immediately, broke down sobbing when she saw it. The police tested it for evidence, found nothing useful. The chain had been cleaned, any DNA or trace evidence removed. But the necklace itself was authentic, confirmed by the engraving on the back that only family members would know about. Someone sent us Rebecca's necklace. Someone who either took it from her body or knows where that body is. Someone who wants us to know they were there, that they remember that after all these years the truth is still buried somewhere waiting to be uncovered. We have increased patrols in the areas associated with Rebecca's case, but with no suspects and no new leads, there is little more the authorities can do. The detective assigned to cold cases told us honestly that without a body or a witness, Rebecca's disappearance will likely never be solved. That we should try to find closure without answers, try to move forward with our lives. But how can we find closure when the signs keep coming? When every November brings new evidence that Rebecca's story is not over. When our dreams are filled with images of dark woods and cold water and a woman we never knew calling out for us to find her. Colton believes Rebecca is dead, that her body is hidden somewhere in the wilderness around Sultan, that the signs are either psychological projections or messages from whatever remains of consciousness after death. He thinks we should focus on finding her remains, on giving our family the funeral and burial they have been denied for over 25 years. I am not sure what I believe anymore. Part of me thinks Colton is right, that Rebecca died that November night, and everything since has been our family's inability to accept that loss. But another part of me, the part that dreams of her and feels her presence on cold November evenings, wonders if something worse happened. If Rebecca is not dead but trapped somehow in a place we cannot reach, trying desperately to show us the way. Our mother says we should stop searching, stop torturing ourselves with a mystery that may never be solved. She says Rebecca would not want us to spend our lives consumed by her disappearance, that we deserve to have our own stories instead of living in the shadow of hers. And maybe she is right. Maybe at some point we need to accept that not everything gets solved, that some questions will echo forever without answers. But we cannot stop yet, cannot let go when the signs keep coming, when every piece of evidence suggests that somewhere out there, hidden in the forests or beneath the rivers of Snohomish County, the truth about Rebecca waits to be discovered. So we keep searching, keep documenting every sign, every dream, every impossible message, keep walking the trails she might have walked, standing by the water where we have seen her reflection, listening for the voice that calls to us through the decades. We do not know if we will ever find the answers we seek. Do not know if Rebecca's case will join the hundreds of other unsolved disappearances that haunt this county, forever filed under mysteries without resolution. But we know we have to keep trying, because she is family, because she deserves to be found, and because something out there is still trying to tell us what happened on that November night so long ago. This is Mackenzie and Colton signing off. If you have any information about Rebecca's disappearance, if you have seen anything unusual in the woods around Sultan, if you have experienced signs or messages that might be connected to her case, please contact the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Every piece of information matters. Every witness could be the one who finally brings Rebecca home. And if you are listening, Rebecca, wherever you are, whatever happened to you, we want you to know that we are still looking. We have never stopped looking, and we will not stop until we find you or until the truth finds us. Your story is not over. Your name is not forgotten. And somewhere in the dark, we believe you are still waiting for someone to hear you. We just hope we hear you in time.